Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Step Forward Ask Me Anything about sales and growth hacking. My name is Gv Freeman, and it's been a pleasure of mine to work with Step Forward and Tech Hub in Romania now for going on 3 years. So I'm super grateful to be able to do this, and a little bit of background from my perspective. For the last about 15 years, I have spent a lot of time in sales and digital marketing, primarily in the tech space, tech and professional services. Today, I spend a lot of time not only helping tech companies grow, but also I do a lot of founder coaching and growth work with founders and with entrepreneurs as well. So as I mentioned, I spend a lot of time helping SaaS companies specifically. I do a lot of work in B2B. But if you also have CPG questions or B2C questions, you can let me know those as well. So with that said, welcome everybody. And if you have questions, please post those, and they will post them on the screen. So it looks like we have the first one coming up. So what should a startup do in order to close its first deal? If you are a tech startup, frankly, if you're a startup in any market, what I take a little bit different approach, and I like the lean stack approach. So I do a lot of coaching using the lean stack method, and one of the proponents or one of the components of that method is called the mafia offer. So it's an offer. You create an offer that your customers can't refuse. And one of the reasons why I like this approach is that you create the offer before you build your product. So we just launched a tech startup about a month and a half ago called Nactivate. And about 3 months before we had even launched, we had started to build the product. But long before we had launched, I had begun collecting our first revenue checks. We actually put an offer out there. We did some education. We did a webinar on LinkedIn. And I had people that believed in the product long before the product was built. And I recommend that to everybody. Maybe you can't collect revenue that early, but if you haven't actually sold someone and had them say, yes, I'm willing to buy your product, then a lot of times I don't recommend building the product yet. So if you can't find what I call problem solution fit, then you may not need to build that specific technology or that specific product. Now, if you have people that have already signed up for your product, or if you have a product and you're ready to launch it out into the market, how to actually sell your first customer, I would go start talking to people. You need to have a group of people that already have the problem that you are solving, and you should be able to talk to them one-on-one and say, hey, how can I get you to use my product to solve your problem? That might be a one-on-one demo. That might be taking them through an education process that says, here's how to use my product. But usually the first sales are friends and family. And even if they're not friends and family, the first sales should be treated like friends and family. So in the beginning, so many people are thinking about, oh, I need to make this like hockey stick growth. I need to be able to scale quickly. And what I found is that is 100% not true. What you really need to do is build a product that people want to use, and that they have already given you some feedback that they are willing to use it. So the first sales should be relatively easy. And if you are out over your skis, and if you've already got a product that is built, and that you're trying to sell with email marketing or sell with Facebook advertising, and you're saying, well, it's not working very well, it's probably because you don't have problem solution fit yet. You need to work on solving a true problem, and you do that. You solve one person's problem at a time or one company's problem at a time. So that's what I would say. So how do you, the next question is, how do you sell to a cold contact? And I would say that this is the next step after you have sold to friends and family. You need to begin to learn how to talk about your product in a very repeatable way. So when you are selling to the initial friends and family, when you're selling to your network, or when you are doing customer interviews while you're building the product, I recommend taking a tape recorder and recording as many of those conversations as you can, and then go back and listen to those conversations and listen to the things that you say again and again and again, and also listen to the things that your customers or your original network respond to the most. That is going to be your initial messaging. Those are your initial unique value propositions. When people begin responding to this feature or that feature, and they begin understanding the problem that you are trying to solve, those are your initial messaging that you might begin using for marketing. So once you have problem solution fit, you may have sold to 10, 20, 30 people. Now you want to start opening up your sales process to more cold contacts. By the way, if you start selling to cold contacts in the beginning and you're using email marketing or advertising, you're going to waste a fair amount of money, because you're going to try and figure out your messaging while you're paying for advertising. And what I recommend is you figure out your messaging, or at least the beginning of your messaging, with your network first, so you don't have to pay for it. Once you've figured out what resonates, the messaging that resonates with your people, then I would recommend using email marketing is probably the least expensive marketing channel out there, but it has a fairly long sales cycle in many cases. So in some B2B organizations that I have helped sell for, we have to send people 15 to 20 emails before they begin ready to convert. So you can use, there are things like platforms like Apollo that will allow you to build email sequences in. And if you have emails in your list that you can start selling to, those are going to be great. Email marketing is a great way to do that. Obviously, people jump to social marketing, paid social, fairly quickly. Facebook and Instagram going to be fairly low dollar amounts. LinkedIn is going to be a little bit more expensive, but you're going to have to get in front of a lot of people before you begin to validate that your messaging works. Now, the other option, as I said before, how do you sell to a cold contact? Selling is a lot like dating. And when you start dating someone online, you don't ask them to marry you on the first date. There is a courtship process. You have to go on a number of dates, and you maybe be dating for months, if not years, before you ask somebody to marry you. Hopefully your sales cycle is not years long, but the sales process is a lot like dating in that respect. You have to court people. You have to have sort of a symbiotic relationship and a relationship where you're giving something and they're giving something. So in some cases, you might download an ebook, or you might create an ebook. You might build a landing page. And when you send someone an email and say, here's my free ebook I'm going to give you, you're giving something to them in exchange for them giving you their name and their email address. So that is a little bit of exchange. That's the kind of the beginnings of a relationship. Once you have entered into the relationship, maybe the next step is a phone call, and maybe the next step is a demo. And if you are completely starting from scratch, you're not going to understand how this sales process works. So you're just going to have to start doing it, but keep it personal. Keep it as personal as possible. If you are just throwing ads out there and hoping that somebody's going to pick up the phone and call you, it's unlikely that that's going to happen because there's very little brand recognition. The reason why when we see an ad for Salesforce and we click on that ad, there is already brand recognition there. So I don't have to worry about getting people over the hump. You're going to have zero brand recognition, so it's going to be a lot of one-on-one conversations. Next question. What are the best strategies to convert trial users into paying users? I think that this is a complicated question because it's very product specific. And I think there's also a lot of nuance whether you're selling a B2C product or a B2B product. The B2B product is going to be much more complicated, and there is, depending on how complicated it is, if it's an enterprise product, then there is probably not going to be a trial process. If there is a trial process, there's obviously some sales reps and some onboarding that usually come into play for an enterprise product. If we go down market to like mid-tier, something like HubSpot, for instance, like you can sign up for a free HubSpot trial. Or if we go all the way downstream to B2C, something like Netflix, I think that my general recommendation is figure out who is converting first. So you need to get people to trial first, and then figure out who is converting to trial, and then look and see what actions those individuals are taking before they convert. So if it's Netflix, for instance, I signed up for a Netflix trial. Maybe Netflix says if people engage 3 times over the course of 14 days, or if they watch 37 minutes of video, then there's a high likelihood that they will convert. Netflix might also say, if I can get people to rate the potential shows that they might like, then I can show them more shows that they might like, or maybe shows that their friends have seen or have told them about. If I can show them the shows that they like, then I can get them to watch those shows. There's a high likelihood of conversion. So this conversion is very behavior based. If I'm creating a CRM system, and if I can get people to create 5 contacts, put in 1 opportunity, and close 1 deal, there's a high likelihood that they will convert. Those are going to be very specific, very product specific things, but you're going to have to watch the behavior of individuals in your product and examine the behavior of those people that are converting. Once you know what those behaviors are, then you want to educate and market to those features. So if it is about getting people to create an opportunity or to close a deal in your CRM system, you want to create videos. You want to create an email campaign that says, I'm going to send somebody an email every day or every other day from the time that they sign up for my trial until the trial is over with. I want to give them information and encouragement to do the steps that I know are going to lead to a conversion. So there are platforms out there that can help you analyze what steps people are taking, and they will help you analyze what those steps are that are converting people to users. And then if you want to increase conversion, you have to educate and teach people how to do those steps. The more complicated your product is, the more steps that could be, and the more research and analysis this is going to take. So I would plan on this being sort of a growth hacking opportunity, is really figuring out what people are doing to convert, but it's going to require some analysis. So take your time and be very agile about this. Next question. What is growth hacking for a tech startup and what isn't? Well, I don't know what is growth hacking for a tech startup and what isn't. I would say that it's not about what is or isn't for a tech startup. I would say what is growth hacking at a certain stage. So a lot of the founders and entrepreneurs that I work with want to start growth hacking far earlier than they should. You have to have growth before you can start hacking it. So many people come to me and say, oh, I just launched my product. Let's start growth hacking. Well, if you haven't figured out how to convert trials to paid signups, and you go start a gigantic product hunt campaign, and maybe you get 1,000 people to sign up for your product, but you only convert 5 of them to actual paid subscriptions, you've wasted a product hunt launch because you haven't focused on the conversion of trial to paid. Growth hacking often gets used far, far too early in the sales process. And in fact, like growth hacking is sort of it's sort of a shortcut when it shouldn't be a shortcut. That's probably a good way to think about this, is that you think that growth hacking is a shortcut to revenue, when in fact, it's really not. You actually need to understand how you're growing first, how you're converting first. You need to have growth. And then once you have growth, that is the time to begin growth hacking. And at that time, you should know what type of hacking you can do to get more growth. What people try and do in the beginning is say, oh, well, I'm just going to launch on Product Hunt and that's going to make me grow. But I'm telling you, you're probably wasting a whole bunch of really good traffic by not having a platform that's optimized. So I don't know if I can tell you what is or isn't growth hacking. I would rather focus on when to use it and when to not use it. And if you're early stage, if you don't have product market fit yet, stop screwing around with growth hacking. Wait until you have product market fit and then begin growth hacking. Prior to that, focus on problem solution fit. Focus on building the best potential product that your customers can use and get them to onboard their as easily as they can themselves. And once that happens, then begin implementing growth hacking techniques. How do you respond to customer objections about your product? With curiosity and openness, especially in the early stages of your startup. If you have objections, those objections are gold. Those objections are future marketing campaigns. Those objections are future blog posts, future ebooks, future webinars, future training sessions. Every one of those objections is and a potential product fix. So if your customer says, man, I would really love to use your product if it only did this. Now, if you have 5 or 6 people or 10 to 20 or 100 people that are all saying that same objection, then it's clearly something that you need to address in the product. There are also opportunities to sell around objections, to say, I understand the objection, and here is the reason why we don't do it this way. I know our customer or our competitor may do it this way. We have chosen to not do it this way because of this, this, and this. And if you still have questions, here's a blog post that explains exactly how we think about it. So in the beginning, as you are getting those objections, you should be writing every one of those down and figuring out what to do with it. But just understand, and I think it's really important, from the entrepreneur coaching perspective, when we hear objections, we pour our heart and soul into this product that we are building. And when we hear an objection from a customer, sometimes we forget that they're objecting to the product that we have built. It is not a rejection of us as a human being. we hear rejection and feel like this customer doesn't like me as a person. They're simply saying, I don't like me as, I don't like the product. And when we feel rejection as a human being, we can react negatively to that. We can take that really harshly. And I would just tell you, I would remind all of you new entrepreneurs and founders that you can't take anything personally. Nothing is personal. If a customer says, I hate your product and I hate you, that's really has nothing to do with you or the product. That's their response. It's their emotions. So just be very kind to yourself, be very kind to the person objecting, and get into the habit of saying, thank you. I really appreciate that feedback. I'm going to take that back to my team and we're going to see what we can do about that. How should a startup go about creating an agile sales organization? Agile sales. So I've been in the business for 15 years. I have never worked in an agile sales environment. And I'm not saying that it can't work, but I will tell you that agile came out of the development community. It came out of 2-week sprints. It came out of trying to get things done, rather to try and get 5 things done instead of 50 things half done. So I would ask why you think you need an agile sales team to begin with. We tried implementing agile in a couple of marketing departments that I have worked on, and you have to have a pretty good sized team before agile begins to make sense. Before you begin to run 2-week marketing sprints, I need to have like a copywriting team and a design team and a product marketing team and a brand team that are all coming together every 2 weeks to make sure that we're working on the right things and we're trying to be very agile with what we're working on at that moment. If you're a startup, if you are really considering yourself as a startup, I would abandon the concept of agile because it's going to add a layer of complexity and management. So typical agile processes, there's like 5 meetings that you have to run every 2 weeks. You have to run you have a product backlog, you have a sprint backlog, you have to have a product kickoff meeting for the sprint. You have to have a meeting at the end of the sprint. You have to have a retrospective. There's a whole bunch of overhead. And if you're a team of like 1 or 2 people, or even 5, maybe 10 people, running agile in sales or marketing is pretty pointless. The other thing is, if you are running a small team, you're probably having one-on-one meetings with your marketing team or your sales team at least weekly, which is even a tighter schedule than agile is. So before you jump into agile, I would do some research and figure out whether or not you really need to. If you don't have a sales and marketing problem today that you think will be solved by agile, I would put it on the back burner until you're much larger, until you're no longer officially a startup. How do you go about starting to do international sales, referring to the case of a startup from CE wanting to sell in Western Europe or North America? So what I would say, and I've worked with a few international organizations that want to come to the US, and the biggest challenge that they have is messaging and marketing. The dialect, the very specific nuanced words that in Western Europe or the US uses, you might speak perfect British English. And I would say, let's make this even easier. If we're talking about British, a company in the UK coming over and selling in the US. We even speak the same language, but the dialect, the nuance is different. So the first thing that I would do is make sure that you are communicating through someone in that country. If you're writing marketing copy, if you're writing content, hire somebody in that country to proofread that content and make sure that there is not dialectical issues. you want to speak in the exact same language that your prospect is speaking in. And I find that happens a lot. In India, for instance, a lot of content will come out of India and they speak great English and they even write great English. But when it comes over here, they're using words that are more British than they are US English. So I think that speaking in the language is incredibly important. I would also tell people to start incredibly slow, just like we talked about earlier, getting your first customers. In your country, well, you have to use the same technique to get your first customers in a foreign country. You need to have conversations with people. You need to understand if there are buying challenges that are different, or buying kind of methodologies that are different in that country. So in Germany, you might sell different than you would in Romania, or in France. They might have to, in Germany, there's a much closer network. So if you haven't been referred in, it's more challenging to sell to a company in Germany. And that's just the way the culture works. So what you might end up having to do is might have to start building referral partners in that company that help start selling you into the businesses that you're wanting to sell. So messaging and understanding the culture are going to be very important, and just start small. Do not go out and waste thousands of dollars on paid media or paid search before you have realized and understand what your sales process is and if your sales process will work. Same thing with the converting to trial to paid user. Understand where your downfalls are. Fix those first in a very small, controlled environment, and then begin to expand. What are the best sales strategies for early stage startups? I mentioned email marketing before. Email is going to be the lowest cost. And I know you can buy a lot of lists. And I know that people bump up against this, and I don't even like buying lists. But the reality is, if you're very early stage, you're going to need to find traction somewhere. And sometimes going out and buying contact information is going to be the easiest way to get started, to at least get some movement and some feedback from prospects. If you go out and buy a list of 1,000 people and you send them 15 to 20 emails over the course of 2 months and nobody responds to you, then you have a messaging problem, or you have a targeting problem. So email is pretty cheap. If you go to seamless.ai, you can go out and find email addresses. Zoom Info is more expensive. You're going to have a budget for Zoom Info. There are other places that you can go out and find lists. But honestly, that's probably the easiest way. I would encourage you to write thought leadership pieces, blog, do webinars, provide value before you ask for money. If you can give someone something, this is that law of reciprocity. If I am willing to give you something, willing to teach you something first, then you might be more willing to listen to me and talk to me. One-on-one communication is the best sales strategy. Go to your network first. Start with your network and start with your network's network. Ask for referrals. Once you have problem solution fit, once you have realized that your product is actually solving somebody's problem, that's when you can begin scaling up your efforts. And that's when you can begin moving to more product market fit techniques. All right. Before wrapping up, do I want to add anything else? I would just tell you that in the startup world, go look for the J curve. If you just type in startup J curve, you're going to find that there is a part of the startup journey that dips below the x-axis. And there, especially in the sales marketing, it's really hard in the beginning. Until you've gotten traction, it is a mind-numbing, grueling process. And you are going to be expending more energy than you are receiving. And when you put out more energy than you get back, it really starts to suck the life out of you. So if you don't have a co-founder, I would recommend going out and finding people in a community that you can be a part of and share some of your frustrations. If you keep all of those frustrations in while you're going through this process, it's going to be really hard and really emotionally challenging. This whole process of getting a startup off the ground is emotionally challenging. So find a community, whether it's Step Forward or Tech Hub or other communities around the area. Get connected to an entrepreneur community so you have somebody to go and talk to. And if you want to do deeper work, and if you need deeper support, both on the business side and more on the CEO founder coaching side, if you have reached a point where that is something that you would like to do, give me a shout. It's gvfreeman.com, and I'd love to chat with you.